Tonight, we drift to sleep inside a cozy 1950s small-town library, wrapped in the quiet magic of Christmas Eve. A 1950s Christmas Eve romance. A romantic sleep story for grown-ups. Goodness gracious, what a lot of work. The very last ornament has been hung on that magnificent Christmas tree, and its hundreds of little C9 ceramic bulbs, strung with care from green rubber cord, are casting a gentle welcoming glow. The only thing missing is the final touch, the Christmas star, and she'll have to climb a ladder for that. But for now, she's taking a much-deserved break right there by the grand crackling fireplace, watching those beautiful golden flames dance as the record player spins Nat King Cole's The Christmas Song. Merry Christmas to you. The music drifts through the room with that tender warmth only vinyl can bring. A soft hiss here, a gentle pop there, wrapping his velvet voice in something sweet and timeless. She's got herself a warm cup of tea, perfect for a snowy night like tonight, sitting perfectly snug between her hands. The library was steeped in the gentle glow of Christmas Eve. Tiers of polished walnut rose high against the stone fireplace, their rows of books softened by the amber light of brass lamps. Garlands of pine wound gracefully along the mantel, their needles catching the shimmer of tiny red berries and golden ribbon. The air held that comforting blend of old paper, pine, and a soft aroma of vanilla and slow-burning cedar, the cozy scent of stories and seasons gone by. And there, by the hearth, lay Mr. Sebastian, her beloved library cat, a picture of perfect contentment. His fur was black as midnight, with 4 dainty white paws, a snow-tipped tail, and the sweetest little patch over one eye that made him look forever curious. Curled into a neat crescent beside the fire's soft glow, he let his tail flick lazily now and then, as if keeping time with the gentle hum of the electric clock on the mantel. Audrey paused in her humming, her gaze drawn to the tall, arched library window. Oh, the sight outside was a perfect wonder. Thick, heavy snowflakes drifted down in a soft, mesmerizing curtain. The world beyond the glass felt suddenly muffled and hushed. Every building wore a perfect pillowy cap of snow. It was the kind of street you might sing about, a scene of perfect gentle peace and quiet, a town holding its breath for the morning. Audrey gave a soft sigh. It truly was the most wonderful time of the year. Just down the snowy street, the old Main Street shops were all tucked in, yet they still hummed with Christmas spirit. The frosted window of Mr. Henderson's bakery was dark, promising the warm, spicy smell of gingerbread and fresh coffee cake tomorrow morning. And next to it, Mrs. Gable's gift emporium was an absolute picture. A little electric Lionel train still circled a painted snow village under a soft blue spotlight, making the heavy icicle tinsel on its tiny trees gleam. In the window, a cardboard Santa from the Coca-Cola display smiled his jolly grin, holding up a bottle of the real thing. The only place still showing any life was the classic town diner. She could just make out the warm, welcoming neon sign of the Comet coffee shop, which sat under a sloping porcelain enameled roofline. The red and blue neon of the flashing marquee cast a faint, wonderful ruby red and pale turquoise reflection onto the pristine, untrodden snow. From this distance, Audrey could almost hear the faint hum of the jukebox. Maybe Perry Como or Bing Crosby playing for the last few late-night customers enjoying their coffee. And just past the diner, sitting quiet and strong on the corner, was the brick and stone fire station. It wasn't lit up like the coffee shop, but she could see a faint, dependable yellow light shining from the bay window of the chief's office. Just seeing that light, knowing he was there, sent a sudden, lovely wave of comfort through her, chasing the last bit of the night's chill away. Her stomach gave a little unexpected flutter, a shy acknowledgement of the man who dwelled in that quiet corner. James. He was the reason this Christmas Eve felt different from all the others. Whenever he stopped by, whether for a safety inspection or to borrow a book, the air in the library seemed to change. She loved the easy, warm clarity of his voice, a sound that settled her spirit like the first warmth of the fire. And she loved the scent of him too. Crisp wool, clean winter air, and the faint trace of wood smoke and honest work. He was the most dependable man in town, a quiet, steadfast soul who'd earned his authority through duty and kindness. And though she'd never admit it out loud, he was the only one she ever wished might linger a little longer after closing time. The world beyond the frosted windows seemed to fade as her thoughts drifted to him. But the fire's soft glow drew her back. It was Christmas Eve after all, and there was still work to be done. Tomorrow the orphans would fill this room with laughter, and she wanted everything to be perfect, warm, bright, and brimming with Christmas cheer. Stacks of gifts waited nearby, wrapped in cheerful paper and tied with red ribbon, many still marked with the neat, looping script of the town's postmistress. Each one had been donated by kind neighbors, soon to be handed out by Santa himself. Smiling, Audrey turned back to her work, wrapping the last of the townspeople's gifts as the fire's warmth and the hush of falling snow filled her heart with quiet joy. The fire crackled softly, the record player hummed with tender Christmas tunes, and Mr. Sebastian purred from his place by the hearth. For a moment the world was perfectly still, until thump thump, rap rap, a sound came from the grand front doors. It wasn't loud, but in the hush of the sleeping library, it made her heart give a little startled jump. Gathering the freshly wrapped gifts, Audrey crossed the reading room's glossy floor, the warmth of the fire seeming to follow her. She placed the final parcels beneath the glowing Christmas tree and paused, glancing toward the doors. Who could it be at this late hour? A quiet hope flickered in her chest, one she hardly dared admit, even to herself. She slid the heavy brass lock of the door and pulled it open just a crack. And there he was. "Goodness gracious, James," she whispered, a little surprised, but mostly delighted. "You're late for your rounds, aren't you?" There stood James, looking every bit the solid gentleman in his handsome fireman's duty uniform. The shoulders of his dark navy wool coat were dusted with fresh, powdery snow, and his face was rosy from the cold outside. He didn't step in immediately. He just stood in the doorway, framed by the falling flakes, a man caught between his solemn duty and the soft golden warmth of the room. Tucked securely in the crook of his arm, he held a familiar, heavy gleaming chrome thermos. "Miss Audrey," he said, his voice a clear, measured sound that was always so calming, even over the sound of the wind. "Just the final safety check. Had to be certain the chimney flue was clear and those beautiful lights weren't running too hot for the big event tomorrow. Can't have anything spoil Christmas for those little fellows." He paused, then swallowed, just a hint of nerves beneath his practiced composure, as his eyes met hers. The firelight caught the faintest flicker of something unspoken there, something softer than duty. Audrey noticed it too, the way he lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary in the doorway, snow still melting from his coat. Of course she knew he'd already checked the flue and the lights the night before, but there he was again, standing in her doorway on Christmas Eve, hat in hand, pretending this was all just good, responsible work. Truth be told, the moment he saw the little pool of light glowing through the library window, he couldn't quite bring himself to pass by. Not tonight. Not when she was there, alone, with the firelight turning her hair to gold. He finally stepped inside, bringing with him the crisp, clean scent of the night air and a faint hint of wood smoke and wool. The snow melted slowly on his shoulders, leaving little droplets that glistened in the firelight. James closed the heavy door with a quiet, careful click, sliding the brass lock back into place. He immediately removed his fireman's cap, placing it with easy reverence on the circulation desk next to the chrome thermos. Audrey's heart gave a little skip as she saw the dark, thick wave of his hair, neatly parted and styled, now catching the firelight like polished mahogany. His eyes, already softened by the glow, looked even kinder as he met her gaze. "No sense tracking snow into your beautiful library," he murmured, his voice rich and easy, carrying that teasing warmth that always seemed to linger when he spoke to her. With a quick, deliberate movement, he slipped out of his heavy uniform coat that still held the chill of the night, and it hung neatly on the brass rack beside the door. Underneath, his white poplin shirt fit him perfectly, crisp and smooth across the natural slope of his strong shoulders and chest. The sleeves were rolled just once at the wrist, revealing powerfully defined forearms, possibly honed by long hours spent cutting and hauling firewood for the townsfolk. The firelight caught the faint sheen of the fabric across his broad shoulders and back as he turned back toward her, and Audrey felt her breath hitch, a delicious, slight tremor, before she could help it. There was something in the way he moved, steady, sure, completely unaware of the quiet effect he had, that sent a flutter through her chest. Audrey quickly looked away, her fingers rising to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, hoping he hadn't noticed her watching him. He wasn't trying to impress her. That somehow made it worse, or better. She smoothed the front of her juniper green skirt, hoping he wouldn't notice the tiny tremor in her hand. "Well," she said softly, "I suppose someone has to make sure everything's safe," she said, meeting his gaze. "Of course," he said, his eyes holding hers for an extra careful second. There was something in that look, not a glance of lust, but a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. He straightened, rolling his sleeve up to his elbows, and the slow, gentle smile that spread across his face made the firelight feel warmer somehow, as if the room itself leaned closer. "Why, Everything looks perfect, he said, sweeping his gaze over the garland and twinkling lights. Almost as perfect as the lady in charge. His eyes met hers again, lingering just long enough that she felt a small, pleasant thrill before he cleared his throat and began his rounds, moving around the library to check the Christmas lights, but leaving a subtle trace of his presence behind. Audrey always felt a flutter of nerves whenever James was around. Whether she was touching up the Christmas tree that was already perfectly decorated, or putting books back on shelves that had long since been filed, she couldn't help sneaking glances at him as he moved through the library, their quiet movements almost like a silent waltz, accompanied by the soft music drifting from the record player. The warm firelight, the glow of the tree, and the gentle hum of the sleeping town outside made the library feel impossibly cozy, and the fact that it was just the two of them in this little world left her feeling vulnerable, yet filled with a deep, quiet desire that made her wish the moment could last forever. James found himself watching her too, drawn to the care she poured into preparing for tomorrow's Christmas event. She moved with calm devotion, so focused and peaceful that it tugged at him in ways he couldn't name. He caught the way the firelight made her strawberry blonde hair gleam like polished copper when she bent to arrange a gift, and the way the tiny rhinestone clip in her waves caught the gold from the brass lamps. He couldn't help but notice the way her dress fitted around her chest and snug upon her waist as the skirt swirled around the room. A few times their eyes met, and they shared a brief, shy smile before quickly looking away, both silently wondering how to start a conversation without shattering the magic of the moment. It wasn't until Audrey began retrieving the tall ladder from the closet that James stepped in. Hurrying to help, as she stumbled slightly, he was there instantly, steadying it before it could fall. "I've got it, don't worry," he said, catching her as she wavered backward and taking the ladder from her hands. His hand steadied her back, firm and careful, the warmth of his touch seeping through the fabric of her dress. The contact was brief, but it sent a quiet jolt through her. Their fingers brushed as he shifted the ladder from her grip. It was nothing really, an accident, but it left her pulse unsteady. She could sense him close behind her, the faint scent of soap and starch from his shirt, and the low sound of his breath somewhere near her ear. For a moment, neither of them moved. The space between them felt fragile, like one small shift could change everything. "Thank you," she murmured, quickly ducking under his arms to give herself a little space, her cheeks warming as she navigated the tight quarters of the closet. Every glance, every brush of skin carried a quiet, heavy sweetness, a feeling both thrilling and tender, as if the library itself had conspired to make this Christmas Eve unforgettable. "No problem," James said, as he lifted the ladder, maneuvering it carefully out of the narrow closet. "You'll need it for the tree topper, right? Should I set it here?" "Yes, exactly. Thank you," Audrey replied, brushing a stray pine needle from her sleeve as she stepped aside. The tree topper, a massive polished aluminum starburst in the classic 1950s style, was beautiful but heavy, far too cumbersome for her to balance alone. James glanced at it, then at the height of the ladder. "Let me," he said simply, already rolling up his sleeves a little higher before taking the star from her hands. She steadied the ladder as he climbed, her eyes following the slow, careful way he moved. Together they adjusted the angle, tilting and churning until the star caught the light just right. "There," he said, looking down at her with a faint smile. "Perfect?" Audrey nodded, unable to stop the warmth that crept up her neck. Perfect, she echoed softly, though she wasn't entirely sure she was still talking about the tree. James glanced toward the window, where the snow now fell thick and fast, swirling in lazy, endless patterns. Well, he said, running a hand through his hair with a faint, rueful grin. Looks like the storm's decided to keep us company. Audrey followed his gaze. Oh dear, she murmured. It's really coming down. I don't think you'll be able to drive anywhere for quite a while. He chuckled softly, stepping down from the ladder and shifting his weight, his eyes dropping to the floor with a faint, coy smile. I suppose not. Well, he added, the half smile lingering, I hope it's all right if I wait out the storm here for a while. Audrey leaned against the windowsill, watching the white blur outside. There are worse places to be stuck, she said softly, a small laugh escaping her. I don't mind waiting out the storm. All we're missing is a good book. We've got plenty of those, and maybe a little music to pass the time. James nodded toward the record player perched on the shelf. Music, we've certainly got covered. He hesitated for a moment, then moved toward his chrome thermos. And I happen to have something else that might make the time even more agreeable. Audrey tilted her head, curious. Hot apple cider, he said with a grin. Picked it up from the diner before my rounds. Perhaps it might make waiting out the storm a little more enjoyable, especially with good company. Her smile softened, the tension between them easing just enough to feel like a quiet invitation. Well, she said, I'd say that makes this a rather pleasant storm. Pleasant, huh? He repeated, pouring 2 steaming cups. I like the sound of that. They carried their drinks over to the hearth and settled in, careful to leave just enough space between them at first. The firelight flickered across their faces, warm and golden, while Judy Garland's tender voice filled the library with Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Audrey felt a flutter of nerves and excitement all at once, finally sitting here with James. She tucked a stray strand of waved hair behind her ear and cast her gaze downward, unsure where to look. Steady now, don't make a fuss, she told herself, though her heart betrayed her with every quickened beat. James felt it too, the quiet tension pressing between them, as he slipped his hot cider and tried to think of something to say. Say something clever. No, say something kind. His thoughts tumbled as he studied her, her soft smile, the way her eyes lit up when she caught his glance, the subtle warmth that seemed to radiate from her. Finally, breaking the silence, Audrey leaned just slightly toward him and asked, Tell me, James, what sort of books do you like to read? Her voice was gentle, casual, yet her pulse leapt. Not too eager, just curious, she reminded herself, though she already knew some of the titles he'd borrowed before. James' lips curved into a faint, teasing smile. Classics, mostly, and a bit of poetry, from time to time. Words that linger, he said softly, then tilted his head toward her with a playful glint in his eye. And what about you, Miss Audrey? You, I gather, already know some of the books I borrowed. Does that mean you'll tell me what you like as well? Audrey felt heat rise to her cheeks, a small laugh escaping her. I might, she said lightly, hiding the fact that she had indeed noticed some of his selections. But perhaps I'll make you guess first. And with that, the first real spark of conversation and playful intimacy passed between them. From there, their words flowed more easily. They spoke of favorite stories, cherished memories, and townspeople who brightened the season. Each laugh, each quiet glance drew them closer, weaving a gentle connection. She found herself laughing more freely than she had all day, while he listened with deliberate care, making her feel seen, appreciated, and quietly, irresistibly drawn to him. Their conversation flowed easily, the awkwardness melting into a quiet thrill of being near one another. Audrey noticed the subtle warmth of him, the steady, comforting presence he always carried, and she felt a flutter that made her pulse catch whenever their fingers brushed while passing the cider or reaching for a book. After a while, James rose and wandered toward the shelf where the small stack of records leaned against the wall. "You've quite the collection here," he said, smiling over her shoulder. Audrey joined him, the hem of her full skirt brushing softly against his leg as she leaned in. "Only the essentials," she said with a small smile. "It wouldn't be Christmas Eve without them." He thumbed through the sleeves until one caught his attention. "Bing Crosby," he said, lifting the record as though it was something sacred. "Now that's a proper Christmas." He handled the vinyl disc with careful reverence, slipping it from its paper sleeve and settling it gently onto the turntable. He adjusted the counterweight, lowered the tone arm with precise, steady hands, and with a gentle, familiar crackle, the music began. Then came the warm, velvety voice of Bing Crosby, singing "I'll Be Home for Christmas," carrying through the room like a sigh. James turned toward her, his expression gentler now, something unspoken flickering behind his eye. "May I?" Audrey hesitated, just long enough for her heart to stumble, then slipped her hand into his. For a second their eyes met and they both took deep, unknowing breaths, caught in the moment when their hands touched. The contact was a shared current, soft yet undeniable, and he felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. James subtly tightened his grip, silently savoring the perfect fit of her hand in his. He drew her closer, one hand finding the small of her back, the other holding hers in a slow, unhurried rhythm. They began to sway, the world outside fading into snow and silence. James could feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric of her dress, and it took everything in him to stay calm. He'd imagined moments like this, quiet, simple, close, but never thought he'd actually find himself here, holding Audrey Bennett beneath the glow of the Christmas tree. For years he'd watched her from a polite distance, too cautious to let on how often she crossed his mind. Now, with her this near, his thoughts tangled hopelessly between wanting to be a gentleman and wanting to stay like this just a little longer. Audrey's breath brushed against his collar as her head tilted naturally toward him. He smelled faintly of cider and pine, the scent grounding her even as her heart fluttered. Neither of them spoke. The music said everything, the wishful melody threading through the quiet between their heartbeats. Though the song was about being home for Christmas, in this moment being here together felt like home for both of them. His thumb traced a slow, absent circle over her hand, and she wondered if he could feel her pulse quicken beneath his touch. just as she could feel the steady rhythm of his. When she finally looked up, their eyes met close enough that she could see the reflection of the firelight in his. For one suspended moment, the air seemed so still, no sound but the record's soft crackle and the distant sigh of wind. He swallowed, trying to find something to say, something that wouldn't break the spell, but nothing came. So instead he held her a little closer, hoping she couldn't hear how fast his heart was beating. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, time held its breath. As the song drew to an end, neither of them spoke, lingering in the quiet warmth of each other's embrace. Audrey wished almost desperately that the record player could spin the song again, without pause, letting the moment stretch just a little longer. But reality intruded, soft and unavoidable. She straightened slightly, her fingers lingering on his hands. "I'd better stop the record player," she murmured reluctantly. James swallowed, hiding the flicker of disappointment that crossed his chest. The spell of the music was gone, but the fire still crackled, casting a golden glow over the library and wrapping them in a warmth. Outside, the wind had softened and the snow was falling in gentle, lazy drifts. He stepped over to the window, shoulders brushing hers, and peered out at the soft white landscape. "Looks like the storm's finally calmed down," he said, his tone easy, yet carrying that underlying firmness she had always trusted. His eyes met hers briefly, holding a quiet care that made her pulse flutter. "I can't have you trudging through that snow," he continued, a small earnest smile tugging at his lips. "I'll clear the path to my car and make sure you get home safely." Audrey's heart swelled at his thoughtfulness. "You don't have to," she said softly, but he only smiled, that easy, good-natured smile of his. "Now, Miss Audrey, it's Christmas Eve," he said. "Let a fella do something kind." A few minutes later, James returned, brushing a light dusting of snow from his shoulders. The library clock chimed 12, echoing softly through the quiet room. Audrey glanced up and froze, a sudden breathless flutter in her chest. They were now standing beneath the mistletoe, a small sprig tucked above the doorway. James' eyes lifted to the greenery, then back to hers, a small, wry smile tugging at his lips. "Is that mistletoe?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I can't recall the last time I stood under one of these." Audrey's cheeks warmed, and she let out a soft, nervous laugh. I suppose it has a way of appearing at the right moment," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. He took a careful step closer, still holding her gaze, his tone gentle and deliberate. "Well, I can't think of a more agreeable moment then," he said softly, a quiet warmth in his eyes. Audrey felt her pulse quicken, the warmth of the fire and the soft glow of the lamps mingling with the quiet thrill of being near him. She wanted to lean in, close the tiny distance, yet she also wanted to savor the moment, the understated charm, the nearness, and the slow, perfect unfolding of it all. James leaned slightly closer, just enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, and pressed a soft, respectful kiss to her cheek. "Merry Christmas, Miss Audrey," he whispered, voice low, smooth, and impossibly tender. Audrey's breath caught, a shiver running down her spine. Her cheeks warmed, her heart raced, and a rush of every good feeling she had for James. Admiration, longing, affection, and something sweeter she couldn't name, bloomed all at once. When James straightened, offering a gentle, reassuring smile, she found herself smiling back, utterly content. The library had become a cocoon of warmth and wonder, and the quiet thrill of being near him. This perfect Christmas Eve moment was one she would carry in her heart forever. The library had fallen quiet, the last traces of music fading as Audrey and James worked together to switch off the Christmas light. James reached up carefully to turn off a strand near the ceiling, while Audrey clicked off the tiny bulbs at the base of the tree, the warm glow retreating into soft shadows. Finally, they knelt together by the fireplace to snuff out the last of the logs, the crackling warmth giving way to gentle embers. Audrey's fingers lingered a moment on the poker as she watched him, and James caught the look, giving her a small, quiet smile that made her heart tug. With a last careful turn of the lock of the library doors, they stepped out into the soft hush of the snowy evening. James held the car door open for her, the warm glow spilling from the overhead light onto the fresh snow. "After you," he said, voice easy and teasing. Audrey slipped inside, settling onto a deep, buttoned bench seat of his gleaming midnight blue 1954 Buick Roadmaster sedan. The car, a symbol of quiet authority, felt solid and warm. The powerful nailhead engine purred to life, and the wide tires whispered over the thin snow on the quiet streets. Outside her window, the town blurred into streaks of white and amber, the gentle wind brushing against frosted panes. Christmas music played softly on the radio, a soundtrack for their shared ride. Audrey caught James glancing at her now and then, those familiar, steady eyes softened by the reflection of street lights and the quiet magic of the night. She found herself thinking of the library, the fire, the lights, and the gentle closeness they had shared that evening. The night had been simple, but perfect, a slow, quiet unfolding of something that had been waiting for years to bloom. James's occasional nervous smile made her pulse quicken, and she couldn't help but notice the way his hand shifted on the gear shift, so near hers that it made her fingers tingle. He seemed equally aware of the small space between them, careful yet unintentional, as if even the slightest movement could speak volumes. Her heart fluttered at the thought, imagining what it might feel like to take his hand, just for a moment, just to bridge the distance. When the car finally slowed outside her small, cozy home, Audrey sat still for a moment, hands nervously at the hem of her skirt. Her chest fluttered, and she couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes, wondering what might happen next. What am I supposed to do now? She thought, her fingers itching to move, to make a decision, yet hesitant. James's jaw tightened, and he ran a hand through the front wave of his hair, a familiar, slightly nervous gesture, as he struggled to find the right words. He wanted desperately to close the distance between them, to finally step further into something real with Audrey. Yet he held back, restrained by the careful, polite manner he always tried to maintain. Still, he couldn't help noticing the faint blush of her cheeks, the delicate way her fingers twisted at her skirt, and the small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips. Audrey's voice came out, soft, almost a whisper. "Thank you for the ride." She instinctively reached for the car door, but before she could fully open it, James was already moving. He stepped out quickly, a quiet, determined grace in his movements, and opened the door for her. "Here," he said gently, offering his hand. Audrey placed her hand in his and wished she didn't have to let go. For a moment their fingers lingered, just a second longer than necessary, before letting go. Then they walked slowly together through the soft snow toward her front door, boots crunching lightly, the quiet night wrapping around them. The warmth of the evening lingered between them, unspoken but palpable. James paused beside her steps and chuckled softly, as if to himself. "I do wish I had a sprig of mistletoe," he murmured, a teasing warmth in his voice. "I might get a second chance at that Christmas Eve kiss." Audrey felt her cheeks flush crimson. She turned toward the door, pretending to gather herself, and then, with a sudden burst of courage and a playful gleam in her eyes, she spun back. She reached for his shoulders and leaned forward, pressing a quick, careful peck to his cheek. Pulling back just enough to look into his eyes, still flushed and smiling, she whispered softly, "Merry Christmas, James." She stepped inside at last, the door clicking softly behind her. James lingered on the walkway, letting the warmth of the night settle around him. A slow, giddy smile spread across his face, and he felt his chest lift, his heart buoyed by a happiness he hadn't realized he'd been holding back. The snow sparkled under the street lamps, each flake catching the light like tiny diamonds, and the quiet town stretched out in gentle, frosted stillness. He pressed a hand lightly to the spot of his cheek where Audrey had just kissed him, lingering on the warmth of her touch. For a moment he simply breathed, listened to the faint crunch of snow under his boots and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees. Then he tilted his head toward the darkened sky, watching as more snow began to drift lazily down, turning the night into a living postcard. A thought floated to him, tender and bright. This would be a white Christmas to remember. He kicked his heels together in a small, playful gesture, letting a quiet laugh escape before straightening with a soft shake of his shoulders. The glow from the library still lingered in his mind, mixing with the golden streetlights and the glistening snow, filling him with a warmth that made him feel impossibly light. With one last glance back toward her window, he turned and started toward his Buick Roadmaster, each step echoing in the hush of the night, carrying the magic of the evening and the memory of Audrey with him.